We'll call the meeting of the Sustainability and Resiliency Committee to order. We have a very limited attendance today, but we don't have any critical action items, so we'll go forward with our agenda and get our presentation, which is the main reason we're here, out of the way. And then it's recorded for posterity's sake and for other members to see this. So I'm John Strand, Chair. We'll run around the table. If we could just do introductions, please.
Mayor Tim Mahoney.
Sean Paschke, XL Energy.
Bruce Grubb, Fargo City Administration.
Greta Graymig, Member at Large.
Jen Sweatman, Member at Large.
Okay, and we have Shelley up there doing, Shelley Byron, who got a whole big bunch of roses today for Valentine's Day. So
Everyone's jealous.
Shelley's, thank you, Shelley. And I think it's her anniversary. So happy, congratulations.
Beautiful roses up at the Hornbachers in North Park this morning.
Do they?
If anyone needs some, boy, they had some beautiful ones.
It's, we won't do any approval of minutes. So Bruce, if you would just take us right and introduce us to today's presentation.
Happy to do that. Adam, do you mind a little bit of an introduction? I'd like to give a little bit of background for the filming of this, kind of explaining why you're here, why we asked you here. At our last SRC meeting, we had a guest presenter named Sonia Kay with the Citizens Local Energy Action Network, and the presentation was related to electronic vehicles. And the presentation also suggested that the city consider requiring the placement of EV chargers at multifamily buildings or apartment buildings. And then they also informed us that they had been circulating a petition and had collected, I think it was over 300 signatures, that they wanted to bring to the city commission and present to the commission the same thing, asking for city consideration of requiring the placement of EV chargers at multifamily buildings, both new and existing. Their proposal was asking for 20% of parking stalls for new apartment buildings and a retrofit of 10% of parking stalls for existing buildings. And so at the end of the presentation, SRC members had a lot of questions, obviously, and because of those questions, the SRC took action actually to form a subcommittee to try take a look and to try flesh out how we might do this, how to pay for it, are there any unintended consequences out there that may not have been considered. And so shortly after that, Chairman Strand found out that MetroCog had actually had an effort underway to potentially study the EV readiness of our metro area here, which really kind of got our attention, falls sort of right in line with that lead-off presentation. And so the chairman and I met with Adam Altenberg and Cindy Gray with MetroCog just to try to figure out what's the scope of this EV readiness RFP going to look like, and would that benefit the city of Fargo. Reached the conclusion that we thought it would, and then we followed up. We brought XL Energy and Cass County Electric to the table and had that similar discussion, and we all kind of uniformly agreed that the state of the infrastructure and the readiness for EVs would be really valuable information for all of us. So with that, Adam, that's my introduction for you. I'd sure like to kick it over to you, but want to thank you for being here today again. I know you worked hard to get this put together, and I really appreciate that. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Again, my name is Adam Altenberg, and I'm with the Fargo-Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Governments, and here today to talk about a draft request for proposals that MetroCog has put together for a regional electric vehicle readiness study, which, as Bruce mentioned, may tie into the discussion that you had at your last SRC meeting back in November. It's envisioned, and before I get into the presentation, I'll just say that it's envisioned that the study will provide local jurisdictions with public understanding of EV feasibility in our area, look at current and potential barriers to EV adoption, and also look at best practices to meet current and future EV needs throughout our entire metropolitan area. So with this brief presentation, first I think most of you are familiar, but I'll talk just briefly about what the Fargo-Moorhead Metropolitan Council of Governments is. And then I'll jump into a couple of slides as to the reason why we are starting to see a need to study EV readiness in the FM area. And then finally, I'll just go through some of the draft tasks that we've put together as part of the RFP that will be going out to consultants here in the next couple of months. So what is MetroCog? We are a federally mandated and federally funded transportation policy making organization. The majority of our funding comes from the U.S. Department of Transportation, which is then funneled through, mostly through the North Dakota Department of Transportation. We also do receive funding from the Minnesota Department of Transportation, as well as local funds from each of our jurisdictions that we work with in the Fargo-Moorhead metropolitan area. And we do have some other funding sources, including grants and some other sources that we do receive funding from. We are designated to carry out a regional multimodal transportation planning process. And what that means is that it is our duty to ensure that we have a safe, efficient, and reliable transportation network across all modes, whether they be vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians, transit, freight, and other multimodal considerations. We're governed by a 60-member policy board, most of which are elected officials in our 7 largest jurisdictions: Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, Dilworth, Horace, Cass, and Clay counties. And it is it's through the policy board that, in their authority, that they develop solutions for different transportation needs, and also they have the authority to address important other regional issues as they see fit. So why are we seeing a need to study EV readiness in the FM area? This graph is from the Department of Energy, and it shows that from 2020 to 2021, EV sales nearly doubled in that time period. We saw over 600,000 electric vehicles and hybrid electric vehicles sold in 2021. I've seen other news reports. I didn't see this on the Department of Energy's website, but I've seen reports that number actually surpassed 1 million in 2022. But anyways, we're seeing a large uptick in the number of electric vehicles that are being sold in the United States. And with that, it's estimated that over half of vehicles sold in the U.S. will be electric vehicles by the year 2030. So what
Adam,
are
do you believe that?
Sorry?
Do you believe it'll be that high? I mean, the reluctance in our community, at least, to adapt to that. John doesn't have one yet. He should be driving one for sure. But I'm just, whenever people say that, and then I talk to different people in the community, I don't get a jump to those. And then always get negative publicity: battery start on fire, start your house on fire. You know, we're going to have the naysayers, I think, sort of pop in here a little bit. And then when we talk to the electric team and how much it costs to convert your house or do those things, at least for John and I think we've discovered some hurdles that we kind of didn't think would be there. And then in Fargo, we have an apartment population of 60%, 55, 60%. And for them to convert would be very hard because the ability to charge isn't there. So is that just nationwide, or if we morphed out the averages, would it be higher in the south and less in the north because of cold weather? Or is this just, when you say 50%, that is the whole United States?
That is the whole United States. And I do, in a couple of slides, we will look at some more stats at the state level. And it does show that North Dakota is one of the lowest EV adopters currently. But yeah, we'll get into that here in a couple of slides. But good question, good point. So what are we hearing from automobile makers? Almost every major automobile company has committed to some sort of EV goals, whether they're committing to a new line of electric vehicles, whether they've set sales targets for themselves, or whether they're looking to become fully committed to developing electric vehicles. So you can see in the blue here, companies committed to developing new lines of EVs. These include General Motors, Jeep, Land Rover, and Toyota. Companies that have set sales targets for themselves, those include BMW with 50% EV sales by 2030, Ford with 40% EV sales by 2030, and Mazda, again, with 40% EV sales by 2030. But the vast majority of car companies have committed to becoming fully electric or equivalent. Some of the higher end or luxury companies, they're looking to become electric first. So you can see here, Jaguar fully electric by 2025 and Audi EV only by 2026. But the rest of these, a lot of these kind of fall in the 2030 to 2040 timeframes. So Buick by 2030, Honda by 2040, Hyundai by 2040, Kia by 2040. That Land Rover is a mistake in there, I apologize. Mercedes fully electric by 2030. Subaru is electric only by 2035. Volkswagen electric vehicles only by 2040, and Volvo fully electric by 2030. So what are professional planning and engineering groups saying? Looking at the internet, there's a lot of news articles to talk about EV adoption in different cities and states throughout the country. But it is good to get a sense of what our professional groups are saying as well. And this is something that we started to hear for myself, started to hear a little bit at some of our state and national planning conventions in 2018, 2019. That's kind of when it started to get on our radars. But if you look at the last 4 or 5 articles here, you start to see a small but maybe notable sense of urgency on this issue. So if you look at the 4th one down, the race to add more public EV chargers from the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations in May of last year. Electric vehicles sales shifting to the fast lane. This is from the American Society of Civil Engineers from July of last year. Building out electric vehicle charging means all hands on deck. The Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, again from July 2022. And then one of the more recent zoning practice articles was preparing for the electric vehicle surge. So we're definitely seeing a lot more professional literature on this topic. So going back to Mayor Mahoney's point here, electric vehicle adoption so far has varied widely across the country. Western states and Hawaii are the ones that are really taking the lead on electric vehicles. So you can see in California, 10.8% of vehicles sold are electric vehicles. In Hawaii, that number is 7.3%. North Dakota is one of the lowest. It's 0.3% at this time. But we do know that with new federal funding, we're starting to see a surge in electric vehicle legislation across all states as lawmakers seek to speed state transitions. And with that, some of these bills include bolstering charging infrastructure, expanding consumer incentives, electrifying state fleets, and also in some instances mandating charging stations in new buildings. With some of the new federal funding under the bipartisan infrastructure law, states are the ones that are going to be tasked with deploying billions of new federal funds. And with that, we're also starting to see that state lawmakers are beginning to take an active role in some of these strategy discussions. But really, what we're seeing overall is 2022, 2023 is starting to look like a turning point for electric vehicle adoption across the United States. These are just, so thinking about the number of commuters in our metropolitan area, even with a small fraction of that 0.3% of electric vehicles being sold in North Dakota, the number was a little bit higher. I guess I can go back quick. In Minnesota, that number is 1.8%. But we have a number of vehicles that are commuting on our roadways every day. These numbers come from our 2019 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, but they show that there's approximately 137,000 vehicles on our roadways every day. And these are just commuters, so these don't include people that may be outside the workforce. But even a small fraction of that number, if these were to be electric vehicles, that does start to add up a little bit. So it's good for us to start thinking of these issues now and start planning for it now, which is why we've developed this request for proposals for this study. So as I mentioned, there's two new U.S. Department of Transportation funding programs under the new bipartisan infrastructure law bill. One of these is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program that includes $5 billion and will be allocated to states to deploy electric vehicle charging infrastructure that will establish a reliable interconnected network. There's also a discretionary grant program for charging and fueling infrastructure. This is a $2.5 billion grant program, and it's meant for communities to deploy public EV charging and other alternative fuel infrastructure along some of these designated corridors. But with this program, up to 50% of the funding must go to community programs to expand EV charging access in rural areas, communities with limited parking, and also to moderate and low-income neighborhoods.
So Adam, bear with me. The program in North Dakota where they're looking out 5 years and they're going to have a charging station, for example, along interstate every 50 miles, within a mile of interstate, is that the left?
Yeah, that would be the
program?
National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program.
And so cities and local jurisdictions would be in the right-hand category?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, that's correct. So going along with that left hand, the $5 billion program, part of that has included the development of state EV infrastructure plans. And you can see on the right, these were completed for all 50 states last summer. And for North Dakota and Minnesota, these were completed back in July 2022. Each of these plans identified designated corridors for EV charging station. Within our metropolitan area, though, it only includes I-94 and I-29, so just those two roadway networks. But in each of these plans, they include goals, coordination efforts amongst a number of different stakeholders and partners, equity considerations, workforce and labor needs, and also a number of different strategies for implementation. So we have a lot of the states that are starting to move ahead, but there's a bit of a gap when it comes to the local and regional efforts, and that's where you see cities, counties, and metropolitan planning organizations start to step in. This is from maybe a 5 to 10 minutes internet search of different local and regional electric vehicle readiness plans that have been completed, most within the last 1.5 to 2 years. About half of these plans on here were developed by metropolitan planning organizations. The others were developed by other local units of governments, whether they be cities, counties, or townships. But the one thing that they're all doing is they're really laying the groundwork for their communities to become EV ready in the coming years. So what will this study be looking at? So we've already developed a draft RFP for this project. In that RFP, we have identified about 7 different major tasks that we'll be asking consultant teams to take a look at. as part of this study process. So, what the one thing that they're all doing is they're really laying the groundwork for their communities to become EV ready in the coming years. So what will this study be looking at? So we've already developed a draft RFP for this project. In that RFP, we have identified about 7 different major tasks that we'll be asking consultant teams to take a look at as part of this study process. you can see on the screen here are some of the tasks that we have identified. The first that we're looking at for this regional EV readiness study is the identification of desired outcomes, vision, and goals. Vision that would be relative to the integration of electric vehicles in our community, as well as goals for regional readiness. The next task that we've identified is assessment. So that's what would include a comprehensive overview of EV trends, barriers, gaps, and background information that would be good for us to learn a little bit more about in our community. Next, we have an equity analysis. What we've identified with this task is that this would look at opportunities to increase equitable access to traditionally underserved residents. A part of this task also looks at whether this would be expanded to multifamily developments throughout the community, as well as low and moderate income areas. So so it's this portion that may tie into some of the conversations that were had at the last SRC meeting back in November. The next task we've identified is identification of infrastructure and service needs. So as part of this, what we would like to be looking at are potential grid impacts, options for EV charging stations that are outside of those designated corridors, but within our community itself. And also potentially looking at methods or incentives to develop missing services for electric vehicles. Next on our list are strategies and recommendations. These would be to support current and future EV needs. We don't know what these are going to look like yet. We'll know once we're further along the study process, but they may include, for instance, codes, ordinances, policies, and different partnerships for EV readiness. Next on our list are funding guidance. So this would look at different funds, grants, and other funding mechanisms for the different strategies and recommendations that come out of this plan. And then last, we have implementation, which would include a timeline, estimated costs, and roles and responsibilities over what we're anticipating to be a 20-year time frame.
Adam, do you mind if we ask questions occasionally?
Yeah.
As you're looking at your tasks of EV readiness, is one of our other tasks the other end of that teeter-totter, the exiting of the cars and vehicles that already exist, and what happens to all of them?
That's a good question. I don't know if we'll address that specifically as part of the study. I think the main focus is really to ensure that our communities are ready for these newer vehicles that are likely going to be seen more and more in the Fargo-Moorhead area. Does that answer
It makes sense, but I see that coming.
Yeah.
That other whole arena, eventually, whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but combustion engine vehicles likely aren't going to be going away in the next 20 to 30 years, if that. So we'll still be having those vehicles on our roadways. But this study is really kind of the start to ensure that with these newer crop of vehicles that are coming up, that our communities are ready for those infrastructure needs. So. But this is one of my last slides. So we have the tasks that we talked about here in the previous slide. The main component of this study, though, will be public involvement and stakeholder engagement. That will really be key. And if you see in the memo that was included in your packets, what we are envisioning for some of our stakeholder engagement would be discussions with city and county departments, transit agencies, our state and federal partners, utility providers, automobile dealerships, major employers in our area, economic development groups, and local groups with an electric vehicle interest or ownership, and then also representatives of other transportation-related stakeholder groups. This may include, it's maybe not as well known outside of transportation circles, but there is a transportation focused group that deals mainly with freight, but it also has representatives from different consultant firms that have traffic engineers that work with them and so forth. So we'll be reaching out to them as a stakeholder. And then last, we have transportation research experts. There's two entities at North Dakota State University, the Advanced Traffic Analysis Center and also the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute. They work a lot on a number of projects that we develop at MetroCog and can provide some of the research information that we're looking to provide as part of the study, and we'll be reaching out to them as stakeholders as well. We also envision that there'll be at least one to several different public engagement events. What we've learned here in the last month is that with MnDOT's recently completed NEVI plan, they're planning to go around the state here in late spring, early summer to gather further public input on that plan. And what we had thought is that this would be a good opportunity for us to maybe combine our efforts and do some sort of joint outreach, potentially in May or June when they are going to be up in our area to talk about their plan. But with that, I'll just note that with this last bullet point, once we're finished with the study, once we're done, the final plan will provide recommendations and strategies, and they may be state specific, they may be specific to certain jurisdictions, but they're not going to be regulatory. This document isn't meant to be a mandate or to tell communities how they should be planning for this. It's really more or less meant to be a toolkit for different jurisdictions to prepare as they see fit. But
Go ahead, Bruce.
yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Adam, you'll hate this question, but any feel for the timeline? What you kind of considering from advertising, taking proposals, doing the study work, producing a document? Any feel?
So we are planning to bring this study to our policy board here this week on Thursday. Hopefully we'll receive a favorable recommendation to move forward with this plan. As the schedule is currently laid out, we would be looking for consultants to propose on this project through the end of March, and would likely be meeting with consultant teams in early April. And hopefully to get this, we would have this project kicked off in May, late April, early May. And we anticipate about a year time frame from start to finish. So we'll be looking at probably the spring of 2024 for a final product.
Good. Thank you. And can I follow up?
You certainly may.
Mr. Chair. And then based on our meeting that we had here where we did have, those stakeholders that came to mind for me, a former city engineering office employee, we had Excel and Cascade. I'm sure they're considered stakeholders.
They'll be the most vital stakeholders.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Don't be shy. Adam, I'm just curious about in the realm of government work, any world work, you have something you want to do, then you go, well, how are we going to pay for it? What's the financial aspect of that discussion? Where will it happen where the discussions evolve about future funding of our infrastructure systems that are currently based on and utilizing gas taxes, for example, and other types of revenues that are very specific from combustion engine vehicles?
That's a good question. I don't know the specific numbers off the top of my head, but if I'm not mistaken, in North Dakota at least, there's a separate tax that is levied on electric vehicles. and I don't know if that's when they're registered or whatnot, but that is meant to offset what would likely be coming in with different fuel tax for regular combustion engine vehicles. So there are ways to circumvent that, and I think that states are beginning to think about what that transition means with regards to their state sales tax, the revenue that it's currently generated through gas taxes.
This is kind of related, at least related to the economics of the process. And I don't know that much about it, but currently gasoline is sold by vendors. You know, they have a commercial interest. It's a business. So is there any potential for provision of these charging capabilities? Is there any potential for that to be a commercial venture instead of something that municipalities provide or a public good? I mean, that's kind of how things work in our society, right?
That's a good question. I don't know if this study will get into the specifics of how some of our future EV infrastructure will look like, and who will be in charge of that. I don't see that as being part of the scope. But whatever that scenario looks like here in the next 5, 10, 20 years, yeah, it'll be different. But it's not something that will be specifically identified in this plan.
Adam, the Fed tax credit, as I understand it, is up to $7,500 for qualifying vehicles for a tax credit. Sean, you might know, but I believe there's also tax credits for installing and putting in infrastructure to create your own charging station in your own residence. Or do you know much at all about that, or?
I don't, not on that one, no.
That's my sense. My sense is you can get a tax credit for the vehicle, and you can get a tax credit for the upgrades for the infrastructure to charge your vehicles at home. That'll be a topic for us to look at going forward, because I would guess that'll really fuel, no pun intended, the purchasing of these vehicles, whether we're ready or not.
If I'm not mistaken on that question, I think some states do provide for that. I don't think it's federally funded though. But yeah.
I think that's continuously evolving too. I mean, it seems like there's more things coming out every different month regarding that too, so it's a wait and see approach maybe.
You may have to turn your term, John, to surging forward or something that's more electric.
You get a charge out of that, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Anybody else? Jen, did anything?
Very good report.
Brenda, engineering?
No, I'm very excited. This will be a good report.
She's gonna have to trade her BMW in 2026?
What was it? We're selling it for a song. All righty. Adam, anything else for final words from you? We really sincerely appreciate this, and the role that MetroCog is playing in this, I'm sensing, is really well received by all of the jurisdictions locally. And there's value to having that higher balcony perspective looking at this, and not so parochial down at our each individual levels. So that's a really good space to have this unfold in. So thank your organization as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Bruce, do you want to just touch on the next topic?
Moving on, yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your meeting packet, we distributed a memo from SRC
We really don't
Chair.
have meeting packets.
We didn't get that, Bruce.
An email was sent. I can
Okay, good.
verify it, yeah.
Okay.
So as we talked about previously, Chairman Strand's been getting some expressions of interest from members of the public saying, hey, we like that committee. If there were an opportunity to serve on that committee, we sure would appreciate an opportunity to do so. And then also as liaison commissioner to public transit, also thought a lot of these conversations, not unlike today, that transit having a seat at the table here probably made sense. And then in addition to that, a member from the Fargo Youth Initiative as well. And so I went back and reviewed how the SRC appointments were made back in, when did we do that? December of 2020. And it was city commission action, involved 2 elected officials, 6 staff member appointments, 3 public at-large member appointments, and then also 4 ex officios. So the city staff appointments were just something that the chairman, the mayor, and I came up with a recommendation for the commission. This time, the chairman indicates he'd like to add 2 staff, 2 public at large. The public at large, we probably follow the statement of interest, public opportunity that we did the first time around, and then the staff appointments would be quite simple. Somebody that Transit would like to appoint here and somebody that the Youth Commission would like to appoint. And I understand that the Youth Commission on Sunday, Commissioner, I don't want to steal your thunder, but not only did they make an appointment, there were 3 alternates that wanted to be involved. So that's kind of interesting. So
You not only stole my thunder, you surprised me. I didn't stay long enough to see that action. If you don't mind me joining, then we'll continue. But the youth are so passionate about these topics. And, you know, there are some communities that are creating youth councils that are dealing with climate actions. And some of our fervor from the beginning was fueled by the youth, right in the time when Greta Thunberg was surfacing and affecting the world. So they're pumped. What we've suggested, I wouldn't be surprised. I hope that we embrace their energy, but I have a feeling they'll come and bring a zeal to our conversations that will reflect that generation, and at least I'm hoping they do, and have the confidence to be safe in our space to have that level of ability to share. They're pumped.
yeah, so what I would propose is that the memo that was prepared for this committee, we change that to the city commission, get it on the commission agenda for Monday, and then we can move ahead.
Shelley, maybe you can help us get that on the agenda? Maybe if you can help us make sure that's on Monday's agenda, tomorrow's deadline.
Tuesday.
Today's Tuesday, isn't it?
No, agenda's Tuesday, but the meeting's on Tuesday, next week.
Okay. Is there a holiday? Oh,
President's Day.
Monday, yes.
I'm catching up on that too. Anything else for the good of the order? One of the final comment is I'm the first year or so, we were really trying to figure out where we're at, assess our state of service locally. And my sense is we've really gotten a good handle on where Fargo's come from and is right now. But going forward, it'll really be interesting to see what lanes we land in. I'm guessing for the moment, we're going to see a lot of electric vehicle conversation because it's ripe and it's in front of us and it's happening while we're here. And so this is, when you go home and you're thinking about these things, put your thinking cap on and make notes and put notes in parking lots of topics to bring forward to us, ideas to advance with us, that will help us really stay ahead of that curve at the local level, because this is our chance to. We don't want to later on in life look back and in hindsight, gosh, we missed it. So this will be an exciting time with something really transformative unfolding in front of our eyes in the next few years.
And Mr. Chair, one of the things that the SRC did recommend to the City Commission and got approved was the creation of some carbon dashboards for city facilities, starting out with the city landfill, but also I'm hoping to bring back a progress report on that. Becky Majerus is leading that effort, along with some appropriate department head support, solid waste personnel for landfill data and those type things. So hope to be able to produce something relatively shortly that we can update everybody on.
In our recent conversation about the landfill, that topic surfaced.
Yeah.
And so that'll be a really good timing in that regard too, to have that information complement where our other actions are. Before we adjourn, are there any folks in the audience that were here for public comment? I didn't know, just don't want to assume that. We really appreciate everyone's participation. We'll have some new members coming forward soon, and we'll have youth voices, stirring us up, even raising the energy more. I especially thank our community members. And you said Casey's not feeling well, but we have 3 public at-large members. And it's important we have these voices at the table.
And we will, seeing what occurred here today and some potential confusion, we'll do a much better job communicating for the next meeting and a follow-up communication confirmation. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody very much. Drive safely when the weather turns, if it turns.